Hello there, everybody. This is Dennis here. I've got Jared with me as well.
Hello.
I think we're probably a few seconds early. We're probably going to we're probably going to give people a couple of minutes. We'll probably start about 2 minutes past.
Something like that. Just like Den was saying, let the last few come in.
Yeah.
I suppose put it out to you now. Those of you that are here, that the chats. We've got the chat going on a separate device, so any questions we're able to monitor that for those that are signed in.
Yeah.
And signed into the YouTube accounts, but like I said, we'll wait a few moments and then we'll be on it.
And I suppose people who aren't signed in on YouTube, they can send us questions after, can't they?
They can, yeah. All questions can be sent afterwards, and either via email or message just one of us on LinkedIn, and we'll endeavour to get back to you.
Okay. You're going to have to bear with us, everybody. This is our first live broadcast.
Mark Burgess. Yes, there is. Well, not video as such. We'll be running through the presentation, and the slides should change, in conjunction to what we're saying, Mark.
Hopefully,
if we've done everything right. We've done several trial runs now.
We have.
And everything seems to go okay at the minute. So
we've done a few pre-pros.
Yeah.
But we'll just give it another 1 more minute and then we will make a start. Okay, not long now. And how long do we think this will take? When we did our dry runs, Jared, this took about 3/4 of an hour.
Yeah, give or take, and obviously, we're allowing time for questions, aren't we, as well? So we'd probably say around about an hour-ish, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. We have a lot of people jump off now.
Yeah.
Oh no! Are we there? Right.
Brilliant.
Okay. Okay, everybody. So I'm going to make a start now. So let the show commence. Okay. So thank you all for joining us. My name's Dennis. I've got Jared with me. Just a little bit of background about Corvin Fox and IR35. We've been around since 2008, and we've been using a legal partner since then. And that legal partner has been doing all our IR35 contract reviews. So we've always been quite close to them. When the talk of the new legislation came in just after the public sector launch, we started getting involved with some of the lobbying with the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, and we were also at some HMRC meetings. And since then, we've been at quite a few conferences, Jared, haven't we?
Yeah, been in London more times than we care for, I
think. Yes, we have. And we've been doing quite a lot of research and content. If you check out our website under IR35, Corvin Fox IR35, you'll see a lot there. And all our live contracts at the moment, we're doing workplace assessments, which is myself, Jared, and our legal partner and the client, and we do a full IR35 assessment. So we've been getting quite a lot going there. And then we've also had an interim focused conference about 3 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and that went down quite well.
Yeah.
So the agenda is going to be what is IR35, then we're going to go through the factors, which I think is one of the biggest parts of this. We'll go through the current legislation, the new legislation. I think, Jared, you're going to go through the CEST too.
Yeah.
We'll talk about your options. We've done a bit of a cost breakdown as well of how much it could impact you if it goes inside. There are some benefits to being inside. Jared, you've done a piece of work on HMRC challenges as well.
Yes, and some of the court situations, which will be dotted throughout, won't they? Anyway?
Yeah, they will. And also just a few things that you can be doing from now on, and there's a few myths in there, and then a bit of Q&A. But as Jared said, fire in some questions. If you're logged on to YouTube, you can fire them in. Okay. So for any of you out there who were able to log in, it'd be good to get an idea on where you feel you are. Is IR35 completely new to you? Or have you scratched the surface on what IR35 is? Or maybe you know quite a lot. So if there's any other people that are able to make any comments, please do so. If not, no need to worry.
No, just pop a 1, 2, or 3 as to where you'd place yourself.
Yeah, and we've had, when we did a conference a few weeks ago, I think people were probably around the 1 and 2 area.
Yeah, there. I don't think there were any 3s when we did it, but yeah, I think I think everyone should. I think really.
There's a lot out there at the moment. Have we had many response? No, I think we've only got Mark on at the moment.
Yeah, so Mark, you've watched with interest, so I imagine you've at least scratched the surface. Madge Fawcett, you're 2 as well, so it's again scratched the surface, which I think at this stage in the game would be a fair assumption for.
Well, I think
we've a lot of interims.
And we found even since the conference, we've actually learned a lot more, and that was only three weeks ago. Let's move on then. So what is IR35? IR35, or off payroll as it's known, was designed to combat tax avoidance. So it's about disguised employment where an employee, where an interim is carried out the same work as an employee, and there's no real difference apart from the sort of the tax benefit that the interim is making. It came about during the 1990s. So I think they're saying it was around IT consultants, etc. But it was about the 1990s where some bright spark said, you know what, instead of working for me on the Friday, he said, why don't you just finish now and come back on the Monday? But when you come back on the Monday, you're no longer going to be working for me. You set up your own company, so I don't have to pay you your employer's national insurance. You can pay a minimum NI, and you can also have some tax benefits by giving yourself dividends, which at the time weren't taxed. So that's where all that came about, and there's a lot more out there if you want to read more details into it. But at the time, the government got wise to it, and quite rightly, really. And there was a bulletin. The Inland Revenue put a bulletin out. It was bulletin number 35, and that was the start of IR35, really. That's why it's called IR35. And since then, around 2000, the legislation has been dripping in, and that's why we are where we are today.
But you won't find the term IR35 in any of the legislation. You'll find it under off-payroll working rules.
Yes. So there's 3 main factors to consider for IR35 that would determine whether you're inside or outside, whether you're an employee or an interim. And the first one is called mutuality of obligation. So that's where your client is obliged to offer you work and you are obliged to accept it. So Jared,
yes,
you're on a 3-month notice period.
I am.
So if it all went a bit Pete Tong for me, I would still pay you for the 3 months.
Yes, definitely.
And if, God forbid, someone else decides to poach you, you're going to have to give me
3 months notice, but it's very unlikely.
Good man. But so we're tied into each other like that. If we look at the flip side of that, let's say a bricklayer, he may be told, who's self-employed, may be told, or she may be told, do you know what, I don't need you tomorrow. We don't require your work. So that's very much outside. So that's the difference between inside and outside is the client is obliged and the interim is obliged to take on the work. So what do you think are things we can be doing, Jared, too?
I mean, another aspect of the mutuality side of things to look at is your notice periods themselves. Yeah. How short can you get that notice period? I know we have started with all of our contracts now, we look at a maximum notice period of a week.
Yeah, we
really. I know we've got some guys where they're happy to just finish it there and then.
And we actually had a contract a couple of weeks ago where the interim rang me from home, and I said, well, why are you calling me from home? And he said, well, they've told me they don't need me today. Well, that's really outside of IR35. So I know we've updated our contracts, but our ways of working, and agreed with the client about if they don't require the interim for that day or a day, we get that built in. So that can take you outside of IR35 from mutuality of obligation perspective. The next one, and it's probably one of the most difficult ones, is substitution. So that's where you're required to carry out your work yourself, or can you send a substitute in? Let me give you an example. Let's say I'm getting my house wired, and it's Wires Are Us Limited are going to do the wiring. So tomorrow, Mary, the electrician, comes in and does a bit of wiring, and the next day, Tom, the electrician, comes in and does some wiring. I'm not worried about who it is. They've got the Wires Are Us t-shirts. They're qualified, so that's okay. If we flip that around to an interims perspective, if you've got your Marks Interims Limited, and you are going, you can't make work, but so you're going to send someone in your to replace you. Now I know a lot of clients don't like that.
They don't, but we have to say is, I think as this has unfolded a bit more, we have got clients which are more willing.
We actually have, haven't we? We've had a couple of clients for a couple of roles have said, we are okay with substitution as long as it's within these parameters. So, for example, they've got these qualifications and this amount of experience, and that we've got the right to say no if we're not happy. And that was, I don't think you get maybe at a GM level, but at other maybe more skill type jobs.
Yeah, is it? I think the phrase which we took from the REC was, "Is it the person or is it the skills that you're after?"
Yeah.
And that very much would help with substitution.
And I know some interims, they team up with other interims,
yes.
And they say, what, if I'm not able to do it, this interim is able to do it, who has worked for your business in the past, and setting up that before, and when you're having an interview, that can help. So sort of like cooperatives type thing.
Yeah.
I'm seeing that happening. And the next one is supervision, direction, and control. So that's all about your client controlling you. So a good example of that would be 4 on 4 off shift manager. Okay, you're doing 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. I need you in for those times. Here's our ways of working. Here's the SOPs we use, whatever. So that is very controlling, and that's quite inside IR35. On the flip side, where that could be outside IR35, is if we've had cases where someone comes in and they are an expert, and the client says, so for example, I'm losing £1 million, or I've got a huge technical problem, I want you to fix it. And you use your best practice to do that. So you are not being controlled. You're setting the agenda on using best practice. And you may work from home, from your home office. You may not say, I'll be in 9 to 5, I'll come in when I need, well, you come in, the task requires, it's usually about 10, 11, 12 hours it can be, and you might be coming in at night, but you're not being controlled. And a lot of contracts can come out outside of IR35.
Definitely, it's one of the more, I think out of the three, that the control element and the obligation are the two which you're going to find yourself being able to negotiate.
Yeah, and it's getting the client on board with that as well, isn't it?
Absolutely,
that's a huge one we found. There's also some other factors there as well. So can you find alternative work? So are you able to work with other clients at the same time? That will help. There's also been a question about bringing your own equipment. From a cybersecurity, etc. A lot of clients don't like people bringing in their own computers, and quite rightly. But maybe if you're a specialist, you may need something that you bring in yourself. There's a big thing on financial risk. So, for example, I know with the contracts we have, and we're starting to get this into the T's and C's and agreeing it with the client, if there is a problem, and it's called detrimental services.
Yes.
And or if where something goes wrong, the interim puts it right at their own expense, which could be their day rate or added costs. And of course, we get professional indemnity, don't we? So that covers that, and that can be I know that can be a big one for putting people outside. And then there's the whole employee benefits. So you don't want to be getting employee benefits.
Definitely
not. Premises where you can work from home, or your office, your home office. That's good. And now also how you're identifying yourself.
Yeah. So, if you get a client on site, are you kind of introducing yourself as, I'm Joe Blogg's production manager with Backable, or are you Joe Blogg's interim production manager for Joe Blogg's Limited? Supporting.
Or are you an independent consultant supporting the company?
And I think on the basis of how you're identified, and almost dropping back to the equipment side of things, is if you're given a work email when working with a client, how do you sign off? Are you signing off as Joe Blogg's GM, or are you signing off as Joe Blogg's interim GM?
They all help.
So, how many factors do you really need? Well, you don't really need all three. You may only need one. Obviously, the more factors you can get in your workplace practices, the better. It is only going to help you. But there have been cases where there's been just the one. Take the Lorraine Kelly case, which was heavily mediatized a few years back. She ended up being outside of IR35 based on control. HMRC could not prove that ITV was controlling her as an employee. So the example they gave was that they've got actors and actresses on their books, but Lorraine Kelly doesn't come under the same.
Yeah, because they'll have a script to go through, whereas I suppose Lorraine Kelly sets her own content to decide what the agenda is going to be. But from mutuality of obligation, she needs to be there from whatever time to whatever time. But
the control. But yeah, she can't. Lorraine Kelly can't just end the show midweek on a Wednesday just because that's that, and she's had a better offer. In the same way that you don't expect to go on to Lorraine Kelly first thing in the morning and see Jeremy Clarkson hosting the show.
But she has got the control of what
she's got the control of the content.
So, under the current legislation, which will be up until April the 6th of this year, it's the interim that's responsible for deciding whether they are inside or outside of IR35. And that's based on the factors that we've gone through. And the liability sits with the interim. So if there's a HMRC investigation, they will go after the interim. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. So the new legislation, it applies to medium and large companies. It does not apply to small companies. There are three factors that classify small companies. So the first one is a turnover of no more than 10 million, 10.2, a balance sheet of less than 5.1, and no more than 50 employees. So you need to have two of those. What I would say is you need to consider first of all, you need to find out if you're going direct. Find out, is the company large, medium, or small? If it is small, then you will have the old legislation.
Yeah.
But it needs to be those factors. And I think, Jared, you were saying something about if there's other companies there as well.
Yes. So if you are working for a quote unquote small company, however they're part of a group, they are classified as a medium to large company. So the new legislation will be in effect.
And the other thing as well is you might be on a small company that's teetering on the 11 million turnover. So if they become a big company or a medium company, then it would default to the new legislation, and vice versa. But anyway, it's one to watch out for. So anyway, the new legislation applies to medium and large companies. So the main thing that's happened, well, there's two things that happened. The first thing is that the liability has shifted to the fee payer. So the fee payers, if you're working directly for a food factory, it's the food factory and they're paying you, it's them. If you're going through an agency like ourselves, Corvin Fox, and we're paying you, then it's us. So the liability sits with whoever's paying you, the agency or the company. And so that's the first thing. And that liability shifts. So let's say I had another agency, a tier 2 down to me, or let's say there's an umbrella company under me. Whoever is paying you is the liability sits with.
Absolutely.
And the second thing that's changed is that the client, so the place where you're doing the work, they make the decision if it's inside or outside.
Absolutely.
So it's quite a big change, really. It's quite a cute way of doing it, really. What they've done is, because the factors remain the same, so instead of putting it on the interim, they've gone to the company, who is going to be more risk averse anyway, and also instead of getting one interim, they might go for, like Barclays, they might go for all their IT contractors or something, so they get more bang for their buck, I suppose. But that's what's happening. So one of the things that when the client makes that decision, whether it's inside or outside of R35, they do it using a thing called an STS, Status Determination Statement. So they make an assessment as to whether the assignment is inside or outside, and that's based on the working practices and the contract for services. And that's all based around the IR35 factors that we spoke about. So it's really, so some people say to me, well, my contract's outside. Well, your contract may be outside, but what are the working practices? And remember, it's the client that's making the decision here. And the assessment needs to be carried out with reasonable care.
Yes, reasonable care. We've put in quotation marks, or whatever you want to call them, because there is no definition, there is no standard as to what the government are saying reasonable care is. But so
we use case law, so that is reasonable care. So we base it on case law,
but I think that one of the big things as well, which has come out recently, is that SDS has to be given with a reason. You cannot blanket determinate and say, well, if they're a shift manager, they're inside, or they're this, so they're inside. They have to say, well, they're inside because there's no substitution, or there's no, there's a lack of control, etc., etc.
Okay, I think we're next one. So you can challenge the SDS. We've actually had someone challenge the SDS, and it was inside. When they challenged it, they brought it back outside.
Yes.
We've had that recently. If you are going to challenge the SDS, you need to provide reasons as to why you believe the client's decision is wrong. So they'll tell you it's because of this, and you need to say, well, no, because
what my workplace practice actually
is actually this, and here's the evidence of this. The client must respond within 45 days. And if the client is correct, they must provide a reason for their decision. If they're wrong, they need to give you a new SDS. There isn't you can appeal with this SDS objection and appeal. Yes, you can appeal, but you only go back to the client. It doesn't go any further. So which we thought was a bit much. But one of our guys has put it in, and it's worked. So as long as you use. He just used case law and actually what he was doing in the workplace.
And I think one of the big things is if you're going to challenge a client and they've used a certain tool, or they've used a certain way of presenting their SDS, i.e. case law or the CEST tool, use that in response with your objection. Sing from the same hymn sheet.
Very good point.
So, I mean, that brings us on to the CEST tool now, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about. So it is the Check Employment Status for Tax tool, i.e. CEST, from HMRC. So it's had a lot of bad flack. However, we're using it a bit more now. There are definitely perks to it, which I'll come on to in a moment. So you can fill it out as one of three people. You can fill it out as you, as the interim or the contractors. You can fill it out as us, as the agency, or you can fill it out as the client. But obviously, remember, it is still the client that makes the end decision either way, whatever you come up with. But it will give you one of three responses. So, first one, off payroll, working rules do not apply. Great. That means you're outside of IR35. Happy days, business as usual. It will come out with off payroll, working rules will apply, which obviously isn't as great. It means you're inside IR35. But you can, go back and have a look at what you could negotiate with the client in terms of your own working practices to enable an outside SDS. Or it will come up with unable to make a determination, which isn't a great deal of help.
Yeah, we've run a few, and a few have come up that way, haven't they? And I think sometimes the client may, if it's, I know as a fee payer as well, I'm going to be risk averse. So if it's unable, we use some other stuff as well, which helps us. But if the end client may be unable, if they're unable to make a decision, make a determination, if they're being risk averse, they'll probably default back to the inside. Yeah. But it's been updated. You've got a few pros and cons, haven't you?
Yeah, it has been updated. And I think one of the big things before I get onto the pros and cons is to say that Big Brother isn't watching you. I think there was a big debate as to whether this was an HMRC Big Brother type situation. But
no, we use it a lot now for double checking things.
Yeah, just double checking. But yeah, there isn't, and you can use it as many times as possible. So let's start with the positives of the CEST tool. It's great for a black and white decision. if something's very much outside or very much inside, happy days, because you can go back and check your old roles, or you can keep checking your new role. It will give you. It's a great way of deciphering those ones. Since the update as well. The second point there, it does no longer make a snap decision on the substitution factor. So, what was happening up until December, I think about midway through December, what was happening is if you couldn't provide a substitute, HMRC, or the CEST tool, I should say, not HMRC, but the CEST tool was saying immediately that your role was inside IR35, based on the fact that you could not provide a substitute. Since the update, this is no longer the case. Which is great news considering that substitution is one of the big factors.
Yeah.
It's free, which is, one of the best things. There's no catch, no clause to it. You can go back and use it as many times as you like. You can see what areas you can negotiate with, what's reasonable. You can keep using it to your own delight.
And Jared, it's as simple as just doing a search for CEST on Google, isn't it?
It is. You just type in CEST tool and it will come up, and away you go.
Yeah.
It is great for checking your current and future contracts, as well as your past contracts. Obviously, with this new legislation coming in, HMRC can still backtrack for 6 years, but using the CEST tool is a good way to you can do the CEST tool on those roles and pigeonhole the PDF document or a printed document to one side if any investigations were to happen. It isn't usage logged, Nigel. No.
Not that we're aware of.
Not that we're aware of, at least.
Because you can. I think I've done it before. I haven't even put an email address in. I think you can. If you put an email address, they email the results to you, or you can just download a PDF without.
Yeah, you can download a PDF, or you can just print it there and then. You don't even need to download anything anymore.
And you don't need to log into it. You just use it. So
no login either. And like I said before, it's a great way of seeing what points you can negotiate with your client. So, obviously, with anything which has positives, there are always negatives. One of the biggest negatives with the CEST tool is that it does not take mutuality of obligation into account. With this being one of the big 3 factors, it is a massive pitfall, which is a great shame, really.
And I think we found, because we use case law with a legal guide, it's been quite helpful, because some of the stuff we've done, mutuality of obligation has taken it out. But it'll be interesting to see if they bring it on board.
The next one is that some of the questions can seem a little vague, to say the least.
Yeah.
I know that Den and I, when we've kind of just put hypothetical roles into the into the CEST tool, and I remember we did one where we changed one answer to one question, and it was only an ever so slight change.
Yeah.
It was only a slight difference in wording, and one put it outside and one put it inside.
And I do think, if you had 4 or 5 people from a client's company doing it for one interim, they'd all fill it out differently. It can be quite vague. We've sort of got our head around it now, but it can be quite vague. Sorry.
No, you're fine. And the last one on there, obviously, there is a disclaimer at the start of the CEST tool which says that HMRC will stand by the CEST tool providing that you fill out the questions correctly. In a court of law, that happens. But there's 2 downfalls to that. Going back to the previous point with the questions being so vague, it is quite easily that HMRC could turn around and go, well, I wouldn't have filled it out like that.
You shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, then, there's no need to stand by it. But the second point, which I personally found quite interesting, was a case that HMRC did versus RALC Consulting Limited. And what happened in that case was HMRC had pulled an investigation on this consulting firm, or the limited company, and the CEST tool hadn't been created at that stage when they did the investigation. However, when the court case came around, RALC Consulting used the CEST tool to help determine whether their role was inside or outside. It then came out as the tool said, well, your role was outside. An HMRC tried to have this thrown out of court on the basis that the CEST tool wasn't created at the time of the initial investigation. As you can imagine, this was laughed out of court. The evidence of the CEST tool was used, and RALC won the case. But the more concerning thing was that the factors haven't changed, regardless of whether they use the CEST tool or not. So it's just worth being a bit switched on to that one as well. But there are CEST alternatives. There are loads of alternatives. To say a few is Parasol. Law? Did you say Law Speed? I think
probably, yeah. But I know Law Speed, Flexer,
Kudos.
We do, obviously CEST is a good one, but doesn't have mutuality. And then obviously what we do, Jared, when we do our assessment, we have the client, ourselves, and our legal rep, and we just do a 3-way call and based on the factors.
Yes.
But there's lots of different ones out there.
So yeah,
we base ours on case law, though.
So yeah, just have a look around, see which ones work best for yourselves. So what are your options then?
So, if you're outside, then that's great news, carry on. What I would say, if you're outside, if the contract changes, you need to get that redone.
Definitely.
You need to change your contract, get a new contract done, and a new SDS needs to be done as well. Or if it's being extended, you don't extend, you start a new contract. But if you're inside, then there's 2 established options.
Yes.
I know there's other options out there, but 2 of the main options are, the first one is you go through the client or the agency payroll. So they basically take your tax off you, and they pay employers' national insurance. Or you go through, the other one is go through an umbrella company, and both of these methods will have an increased tax liability. I think we're going to come to it next.
Yes.
But
we'll put some disclaimers out now.
Yeah, let's put disclaimers out now. Right. So this is one I've done with let's say you're on £450 a day and you're working 21 days, 12 months in the year. I'm not giving any holidays. That will come to 113,000. So I've just run that through. My accountant's got a sort of a system that works out your income tax, etc. if you're PAYE, and that came out at 35.5k, and obviously it depends on your tax code, and you'd also have national insurance taken out, so your net earnings would be 71.5k, and there may be some pension on that as well. So I don't know what, if you're on 450, how much I would think you're paying a lot less tax than that. You may be putting a lot more into your pension, which would bring your corporation tax down a lot more. You might have 2 directors in your company. So it's a big whammy, isn't it, this? The other thing as well to remember is that the employer's national insurance is an added cost that the employer, or the fee, which would be the fee payer, I suppose, but now needs to pay, which is 14.5k for that. And I don't think that's including the apprenticeship levy either.
No, which is
0.5%.
0.5%. We've just had a question from Mark as well about what the definition of an umbrella company is.
That's a very good question, Mark. I'd suggest I've done a few little questions. Well, first of all, let me point you to our website. Zoe has done a case study on umbrella companies, and she's done a case study on umbrella companies. So that would probably give you a bit more information there. I think she's picked out 4 and given a cost breakdown. But I do know that if you,
it's essentially all an umbrella company is someone that takes you onto their own books.
It's like a shell company, really, isn't it? Let's move on to that. We might answer his question in the next one. So if you go through an umbrella company, and as Mark was asking, you're going through their books, you basically are their employee, and they take out the same taxes that we had there. So they take out the 35, the 6, and you get the 71. Well, you don't get the 71 because they charge you a cost for doing that, and that's around about £100 a month they charge. However, they also charge you, because who's going to pay the employer's national insurance? They're not going to pay it, so they charge you umbrella employment costs, which funny enough add up to about the same thing. So there's an extra cost that you'll be hit with there as well. Remember, this is only our view. Mark, I'd be suggesting, if you're looking at it, I'd have a look, make sure they're FCSA approved. I know Parasol are quite good. They've got about 150,000 contractors. Some of our guys are coming to us and they're under Parasol already.
Yeah.
The other thing is there's new legislation. There's an umbrella review coming in, government legislation. I know when it happened in the public sector, PAYROLL said there was a 300% increase in people using them, but then after a few months it went back down to normal.
So that legislation is coming in. We'll just be looking at the umbrellas within the supply chain. So this is why we're kind of saying try and make sure they're FCSA accredited, because the last thing you need mid-roll is for that umbrella to fold.
Yeah, or something offshore, or something a bit dodgy. So. By the way, there was a few sort of provisos there. This is just our view.
Yes, definitely. All disclaimers.
All disclaimers. But listen, there is some benefits to being inside, and some of my interims have started coming to me and saying, "Do you know what? I can't be bothered with it. It just makes life easier." And some guys are doing that, and that's fair enough.
They've been outside as well.
We thought they were outside, yeah. So, but it makes life easier, because it takes away the IR35 investigation worry. Also, you'll be put onto you could be in a fixed term contract, so you'll have a bigger notice period, so it'll tend to roll for longer, and you may get some benefits with that. There may be some holiday pay, pension, sick pay, other benefits, maybe bonus. So it does depend. I checked that one out. Also, there's more roles to go for, because I know. Are you just going to go for outside IR35 roles, or will you go for inside as well? And we think the roles will be longer. There'll be longer contracts.
We've just had a question from Olsay. So, what do the umbrella employment costs entail?
Well, it's a bit vague. I'd try and we've sort of, if you do a bit of a search in umbrella companies, I'd have a look at Parasol and a few other companies like that. But the umbrella costs, basically, if they're going to have to make money, they don't want to pay if they paid employers national insurance 13%, well, they couldn't make a profit. So I think, this is only my view, but I think basically they cross-charge you the employer's national insurance of 13.5%. The money they make, it's about 100 quid. That margin is about what they make on it, which is what they charge you. But listen, I know some people use it because it's a handy vehicle for them.
Yeah. So, HMRC challenges. I'll give you a bit of a background on this. So, currently in the UK, the amount of contractors sit at around 2 million, with roughly 1.77 million of you guys doing it as your full-time profession. So, as you can imagine, HMRC, but number of HMRC investigators is nowhere near that figure. Nowhere near. When we were on the REC, one of the REC conferences, they said there was about 40, which seems a little bit off, but
they said it was about 40. That can't be right. I know we may have heard it wrong, but if you look at the number of the court cases, it probably sounds right. But I know they are getting a lot more investigators. They are, aren't they?
They are, and they are limited to the amount of new investigations, that they can do every year. So I believe it sits around about 250 new investigations every year,
which is a tiny proportion.
It is
of the amount of contractors and contracts out there.
So let's have a look at some of the court cases. So between 2001 and 2018, there were 31 court cases based around, inside, outside. And HMRC have only won 13 of those. I would like to point out at this point, there would have been more investigations, but they would have just been settled outside of court. But yeah, so HMRC won roughly about half of those. However, between 2010 and 2018, 15 of those 30 let me try that again. So 15 court cases were taken to court out of that 31 between 2010 and 2018, and HMRC have only won 2. Yeah. So what that tells me is that contractors and clients are starting to sing more from the same hymn sheet in terms of the working practices and the correlation between the working practice and their contracts.
Yeah, for definite. And there's a lot more legal companies specialising in now supporting and understanding the whole legislation. So, any questions there, Jared?
Yeah, so we've got one from Nigel. View to not rule out in. Get roll and then work with client and you guys to determine. Which is one way of doing it, Nigel. I mean, the best way to do it is obviously to get your SDS before, before you start, because the last thing you want is to keep waiting until that next payday, and then waiting for it to drop, and then trying to go backwards and say, well, actually after that payday we determined the role was outside, and then trying to trace back.
I know when we're getting roles coming in now with our vacancy checklist, we're asking IR35 type questions, which our legal guys and our CEST ask. So we sort of build them in, so we've got a good idea of whether the role is going to be inside or outside. And so when we're advertising a role now, we usually say, from recently really, we started saying this role looks like it's inside or outside, so it manages expectations. Is there any other questions there, Jared?
No, that's everything I believe at the minute. I mean, I'll say he's not seeing the employment costs on their pages. It's a little bit more of a hidden cost, isn't it?
I'll say I'd have a look on our website under Corvin Fox/IR35. There's a case study in there that was always done on, it's called Umbrella Case Study. Have a look at that, and she's put a bit there. Down. But it is quite difficult to get that information. But I think you're going to be looking at whatever you're charging. You're looking at another 13.5% plus 100 quid a month. I think it's going to be something like that. That's only my view. So things that you can be doing. Is this me or you, Jared?
A bit of both. So
you start.
Forewarned is forearmed, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah.
So the more you can kind of be prepared, either doing the CEST tool, or if you've got your own legal partner that you can carry these things out with.
Getting a big understanding of this, when we went to a few of the conferences, there was some people from the public sector speaking, and they were saying, the recruiters and the interims that have done very well when it hit the public sector were the people that read up, were prepared, done their background work, and coming to the next point, we're educating their clients as well. So, if you forewarned is forearmed.
There was two categories, wasn't there, that they were saying with the public sector. There was those that helped, and helped the client along and helped to educate as well, and those that hindered.
Because the client will, within the next few years, the client will be a lot more savvy because they're being forced to make the decision on the SDS. But at the moment, you do need to be educating your clients. I've noticed with the clients, we have some of our clients are really savvy with IR35, whereas some clients, they won't have really worked maybe with interims before. So when they start being asked questions about a control, they really think of people as being employees. So there is an education process around there, and that's something that you can be doing with your clients. Do consider the inside outcome. Don't just restrict yourself to outside. So you can say, if it was inside, would I be happy to go with an umbrella? Would I prefer to go fixed term contract? If I was going to go, what rate would I go for? So let's say I'm on 350 or 300 a day now. What would I need to increase it to be able to get there? So I'd start thinking about that now. Try and get deliverable-based targets. I've got some interims out in roles who are getting X £100 a day, but they also get an extra few hundred or whatever when they hit a certain target. I've got that in place. And try and have it deliverables, and start using the test. There's the CEST. Start using the CEST. I'd recommend you go when you just log on, well, not log on, just go into CEST and just run with it. And then you can sit down with your client and say, look, this is what I've done. What do you think? And they go, well, yeah, I agree or I don't agree. And that will really help. And if they don't agree, you can start educating them there and say, well, this is what this means. And, I do have liability insurance. And, okay, well, I didn't realise that. So you can start having those questions.
And I think one of the things coming back to that point of considering the inside outcome is also being understanding of the fact that you could negotiate to the hilt sometimes, but some roles they will just be inside.
They'll just be inside. And you don't want to price yourself out really, because it's a fixed term and you increase your rate by X, we'll say 100 or whatever, and then the client's also got to pay the 13.5%. But if you got a skill they require, then there you go. Okay.
So a few myths then.
Yeah.
So if I'm I'm a consultant, so I'll be fine. which it isn't the case, is it?
No, and we've had a few people call, even last week I've had people saying that to me. I'm a consultant, I'm fine. I only work a couple of days a week, or, well, it doesn't matter how many days a week or a month you work. It's all down to the factors covered around the assignment. That's what makes you inside or outside. If the contract is, my contract is outside, so I'm fine. Well,
this isn't really the case, is it?
No.
If it's all to do with what your workplace practices are and making sure that your contract is in alignment with that, not just because of the determination itself, but if anyone were to be taken to court over this, your contract would not stand up.
Not by itself.
Not
it
by
needs
itself.
to have the others, for definite. And then international work is outside. It's a bit of a grey area. I'm with this with the budget announcement and with the apparently with some feedback that it's definitely going through. There needs to be a bit more clarity. But what it was looking like with international workers, if you're working abroad and it's for a foreign company abroad, then it's the old IR35 legislation. If it's a British company but it's abroad, it's the new legislation. That's where that's going. I know there's a bit of confusion because maybe they've got companies in the UK as well, but I sort of go by if the head office or where they're paying you from. The other one is multiple contracts. I've had a few people say, well, I'm working on a number of contracts.
It doesn't necessarily, it helps, don't get me wrong, it helps you and helps your argument for being outside of IR35. However, each contract will need to be assessed on its own as an individual role. So you may end up, say if you're doing 3 contracts, you may find that 2 of your contracts, they'll be outside, but one of them perhaps will be inside of IR35.
And even if it's only for a few days, legislatively, you do need to get an SDS done. I've been told it's easier to be a sole trader. Well, maybe for the person being the sole trader, but again, this is quite grey. But the one thing I would consider is if you say you're a sole trader and you say, well, it's okay, I'm a sole trader because I'm paying my tax. Yes, you may be, but the client, if it's inside, will have to pay another 14.1%. So that's something to consider. So I think there's a move to try and go away from that. I know from REC anyway, they were recommending that. I'm a shift manager. I must be inside.
We'd have said differently about a month or so ago. We'd have potentially thought differently.
We would have thought, I must be inside, but we've actually had a shift manager come outside, which is a bit unusual, but I think it was substitution was allowed for that one.
Substitution and mutuality of obligation.
So that's what happened there.
But I think even coming back is not necessarily just a shift manager. It's anything which could be a role fill or could be have a job description.
Well, we thought that, didn't we? We thought, well, if it's got a job description, it must be inside. But no, it's all about the factors to control the substitution and mutuality of obligation, some of the other minor ones there. That's what it's all about. And that's what we've been having to get our head around. And then substitution is not allowed, so I must be inside. Well, we've covered that. No, that's not the case. So.
Okay, so we're moving on to questions. So I'll work back through the feed. I know that a few of you have popped in with questions. So think where we are at. So also, I've seen so many calculations inside and outside. Working as inside is worse than working as permanent. You get to pay all the taxes, the national insurance, and expenses are deducted from net earnings through the umbrella company.
It's probably it's not efficient at all. It's probably, I would say, you've got more tax to pay. And the other thing you've got as well is when you're inside is if you're still holding on to your company, you're still going to have to be paying your accountant. And I think if you go through an umbrella, the umbrella company does your liability insurances first. So I think they may cover that one off for you.
Nigel, how are the conversations going with clients about increased rates because of inside effects?
We haven't. I've had a few cases where the role has gone inside, and it's gone inside, and the interim has said, well, their contract was due to finish around then, so they just decided to finish it there. And I've got another one where the interim I haven't been in that position yet. But where I have been is for a fixed. I've done a few inside roles where I've gone in with, so I probably have actually, for a fixed term contract, we've gone in with some big rates, and the clients have just said no. That was for an NPD one, wasn't it?
NPD, and it'd be and then it's negotiating down because everybody's got what they'd ideally want, and everybody will think as well, where's my bottom line? And it's just about seeing if we can strike a balance between the client and yourselves.
It depends on the need as well, doesn't it? What their need is. You know what? Just one bit of advice I would give to interims out there. You know, ideally, you guys want to be speaking to the decision makers, the MDs, the heads of function, the person who's got the problem. You know, if they want to get you into their business, you know, you need to be speaking to them because they're. Let's say you're losing £1 million a year, or you've got a PIU red. They're more worried about the PIU red and the losing $1 million than your PAYE. So having decisions with them and educating them about IR35 is a better way of going.
Definitely. So Mark, you've said so. If you're not inside, if you're inside IR35,
yep.
How can the company legitimately not pay you holiday pay, etc.? It's just like a full time for a fixed duration.
Well, it's funny that I'd agree. And when we went to REC, we were asking about this, and what they've said is, with from an employment perspective, if you go inside, you have to pay the tax, but you do not get the benefits. So they haven't started. So the government isn't looking at that. They're more worried about getting the tax. So you're right. You know, why if I'm doing that, I should be getting the other benefits. The government is at this moment in time, and maybe someone could correct me if I'm wrong, but it's more focused around the tax.
It is, but I think, you know, one of the, although obviously we've been talking about umbrellas a little bit, umbrellas may be a bit more inclined.
They do pay. They do. When you're paying your, I think with umbrellas, you do get some holiday pay and some there's some sickness in there. I don't know what it is, and it depends on your fixed term contract. Maybe you negotiate that with the client and they say, well, I will give you X, Y, and Z. But from the government's perspective, they're more worried about the tax.
So Nigel, you've come in with, sorry, I'll say I missed you there, my mistake. So anyone working inside due to the nature of a project, then it's better working as a fixed term contract pro rata than through an umbrella. Potentially, yeah.
Say that again.
So if anyone has to work inside due to the nature of a project, then it's better to work as a fixed term project on a pro rata basis than through an umbrella company, which for an interim somewhat.
I would think if it's the rate, if the rate's the same, fixed term contract would be better. I suppose the question there is the client willing to take that 13.5% hit? If they're not, they might get you to reduce your rate by 13.5%, or you use an umbrella and you do it. So I think a lot of it is around the 13.5%.
Yeah, and Nigel, you've come in saying relaxed rules in year one. Somewhat they're saying that they are. However, the reality is someone is still liable. You know, you cannot just you can't still make your blanket decisions. You still have to take the reasonable care. You still have to do things by the book. You know, this whole aspect of a soft landing, I don't believe it's a reality. Not really. And from what I've seen on Contract Calculator, Contractors UK, these sorts of sites, they're very much saying the same thing.
That's a good idea. I'd recommend people look at Contractor. Have we got that?
Contractor UK, which I'll pop up now on your screens. I have a load of handy links.
Yeah, there's some good ones there. Contractor UK. If you get onto their Contractor UK, get onto their distribution list. They send emails 2 or 3 times a week, and they've got all about IR35 government legislation. They're a huge lobbyer. And then Contract Calculator, they're really good as well. So I'd get on those. We've put I think there's some umbrellas on the bottom. It's worth having a look at them. Yeah. And we've got some videos there as well.
Also, you said that I've been told that maternity cover is inside. Some role fills are also inside. They are, but they are only inside based on the factors. They are not inside based on the fact that they're a role fill or based on the fact that it's a maternity cover. It'll be based on mutuality obligation, substitution, the control.
But that's about educating the clients as well, isn't it? Because I would have probably said that a month ago as well. And I know our legal guy has been banging our heads against the wall saying it's not the role, it's the factors.
I'm not quite sure what you mean, Nigel, by people saying plus 28%, whether that's in regards to perhaps one of the previous questions, I'm not entirely sure.
I think we've probably got a time lag between us talking
Yeah.
and the comments coming as well.
From obviously, I think that's all the questions we've got there. I'm glad, Mark, that you found it very informative, and obviously that you found the conference was great as well.
Well, that's good news. I think what we're going to do is, this is going to be recorded, isn't it?
Yes.
So we'll probably send this out, and if anybody wants a copy, well, we'll send it out, won't we?
We'll send it out. It'll be on. We'll put a link shortly. Well, probably not today, but in the coming days on LinkedIn. For all of our interims that are part of us and who are on our books, you will all get a copy of this link as well, so you can go back and play it in your own time. Like we said at the start, for all of you that have been watching, who haven't been able to ask questions, ping us an email, drop us a message on LinkedIn with your questions. We will try our best to get back to you as quickly as we can. But for everybody that's signed in, whether you've been able to ping questions across or whether you sat and watched, thank you very much for...
Yeah, thank you. And hey, we've done it in 55 minutes.
55 minutes, which is a great time. And the interaction's been great as well.
Yeah, it has been great.
So thank you very much for that. And like we say, any questions, ping us an email, and we'll try our best to help.
Okay.
But that's us over and out. And
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye now.
Bye.